Welcome to Three, a show about Federer, Djokovic, and Nadal. I'm Gil Gross, host of Monday Match Analysis with outstanding tennis journalist Joel Drucker and Amy Lundy, and we are well underway in London. ATP Finals, and two of our three, the only two playing, have each taken losses here. So we want to parse what happened in those matches. Both of them were the second matches that Djokovic and Nadal played, respectively. Djokovic lost 6-3, 6-3 yesterday to Daniil Medvedev. Rafael Nadal lost 7-6, 7-6 to Dominic Thiem. So let's go in chronological order. Start with Thiem. Joel, you covered this one for tennis.com. This was probably one of the best matches we've seen of the year. Are you with me on that?
Absolutely. It's great quality. And it's kind of the case for underplaying. I mean, these guys have played probably half as much tennis as they usually play coming into this event. And they were just outstanding rallies and intensity and energy, all sorts of great shot making.
Yeah, I mean, when these two play, it's such a slugfest, and we're starting to get these consistently unbelievable battles.
Well, maybe that's a good thing that it's half as much tennis as they had normally played at this point in the year. Maybe that's why we got such a phenomenal match. Just a thought.
Oh, no, absolutely. That gets to the point raised about calendar reform and maybe the need to have the season be able to maybe not half as long or half as many matches,
right,
but something to that, because there was a freshness that each have. Not that people have staggered at this tournament. I mean, I think this tournament lends itself to some very high quality tennis. It's indoors. It's just these 8 people. There are no dangerous floaters. They know each other. And Thiem and Nadal, that was one of those mini cult masterpieces. I mean, it's not going to be an all-time great match. It wasn't at a major, and it's not like the 5-setter they had at the Open a couple of years ago. But still, a lot of great shots. Thiem came up with a lot of big shots. Nadal serving at 5-2 in the first set tiebreak. And guys, in that first set tiebreak, neither of the server was holding serve a lot. There was some really interesting points. And Thiem, I mean, he swings big on big points down. He goes after the shot he needs to take. And maybe he's a little bit of a child of the big three who's seen, if you want to beat these guys, you better bring something, right? You best bring a gun. I mean, and he really swings after it. And Nadal was a little confounded by it all. I mean,
well, Thiem is playing with a lot of confidence now that he has the Grand Slam under his belt, right? He's no longer maybe so much in awe, and he's got a little bit of swagger. He can swing free. I mean, imagine if you had that big pressure build and then you finally broke through. It's just going to allow you to swing that much freer.
Yeah, but this was really similar to when Thiem and Djokovic played in the Australian Open, and that was 3 tie breaks in that match. Thiem won all 3 of them. It was the difference in the match. There was nothing between those two until the big moments, and then Thiem was the better of the two. The same thing happened here, and Dominic Thiem is 10-1 in 2020 against tie breaks against top 10 players.
Wow, that's an amazing stat. I think Nadal, when it comes to hard court, is going to have to do a little bit more homework, especially when it comes to getting into Thiem's serve. I think he's going to have to be smarter about his return position. We know that he's got it down cold on clay, right? But on hard court, he's going to have to really look into the numbers and perhaps vary it up a little bit in different situations.
Well, it's so interesting. Also, indoor hard, Nadal has won one tournament there in his career. Not that he's terrible. It's just that I think the things that upsize him are diminished, and the other players feel they can swing more freely and go for their shots more. And Thiem, who of course beat him in Australia also. I mean, this tiebreak mastery is quite impressive. I mean, Thiem has a neat, versatile game. He's fit. He's willing to strike big off both sides. I mean, I think he's really impressive. And is also, like Amy said, he's gone from the contender and waiting to now he's delivered. So now he has this period, and he'll probably have another 18 months before we start running. Okay, where's the second one? And then it's kind of like after going to the dentist, and so the tartar accumulates. But at first, right now, he's got a clean set of teeth. He's swinging great. I mean, it's just, I really like watching Dominic Thiem play, and him versus Nadal. That's a really exciting matchup. Just so many great rallies, so much court coverage. Nadal obviously trying to do things with the forehand, but and Thiem at one point he even hit an old school slice backhand passing shot cross court that looked like something out of Ken Rosewall. He came up with that. I mean, just some remarkable
on a big point. On a big
point.
He ended up breaking in that game, right?
That's right. That was the 4-3 second set. And the amazing thing about Nadal, he really personifies that concept, beware of the wounded bear, because most people, you win the first set against them, there's going to be at least a little lag that might make a guy break open the match. I mean, how many times do we see a 7-6, 6-3? And with Nadal, zero. None of that. In a way, to get to the a recreational lesson, that's a great lesson. That has nothing to do with technique. That's just about attitude. That's a really interesting thing about Nadal. That's kind of things you can learn from the pros that have nothing to do with hip turns or torquing or footwork or fitness or weight training. It just has to do with attitude. It reminds me of Navratilova once told me once. She said, there are two things you can control in tennis, your toss and your attitude. And Nadal is just so good at that.
That's a great one. I want to bounce this theory off of you both about Dominic Thiem, which I did so on Twitter as well, with the caveat that consistency is very important. For my money, at the peak of his powers, if he is redlining, if he is not making any mistakes, Dominic Thiem's best level is actually the best in the world in 2020.
Well, is the other guy redlining? Like,
yes.
is Nadal redlining on clay? Then no. Is Novak redlining at the Australian Open? Then no. I don't know. I think it's remains to be seen, but I'm not even sure. The Thiem is so good, it's hard to know when he is redlining because he's so consistent. And he's just he's got the power, he's got the smarts, he's got the court awareness. He is very good. And I think our big three, like I said before, they're going to have to step it up in terms of the homework that they're doing on this guy. And they're going to need to look for the little subtleties in his game. Where's he serving when it's 40-15, is he going out wide more, learn his little tricks and tendencies, and they're going to have to focus in on this guy.
Yeah, it's interesting to see as he's ascending just how good he can really be. And that's, I think, what's exciting about someone like that. And the redlining, I mean, the Novak, I'm thinking of a great Novak performance, and that would probably be the 2019 Aussie versus Rafa when he beat him that day in straight sets. So it's called this, it's so tough to tell. This game doesn't occur in a vacuum. So you don't know, and there's so much with matchups. But Thiem is, wow, he plays some very exciting tennis. And of course, because it's new, that's exciting too. I mean, the other guys are great. Nadal showed something incredibly new and amazing when he won the 13th French the way he did. But Novak, we're kind of gotten used to an acceptable mainstream of excellence from Novak. I'm not saying we're taking it for granted, but it's so up there all the time. I mean, it'll be interesting to see this week in London, but really the next big thing for Novak is going to be what we see at the Australian Open.
Yeah, and just to clarify, best of 5 sets on a clay court, French Open conditions. I do think Nadal's best beats anyone in the world. No doubt about it. I just think in most conditions over the course of the calendar year, and grass is also a huge question mark, I actually think that, again, Dominic Thiem at the peak of his powers, which doesn't always happen. That's not the reality of tennis. I just think he's such a problem and the most explosive player on tour at this point because he's in his prime. He now has a really big serve. He hits massive from both wings. His movement is right up there with everyone. So is his fitness. If he's putting, all the balls in the court, I just think it's an overwhelming task to try to beat Thiem at his best.
That is, well, of course it is, no question. I mean, he's going to finish the year ranked 3 in the world. I mean, yeah. Actually, so the match we're looking to see when we think about Thiem, since we've seen him with Djokovic, we've seen Nadal play this year. We want to see like a Thiem Federer somewhere. That's going to be an interesting thing to see when Roger returns and where he is physically, and then having to grapple with Thiem, because Thiem is in this ascent and Roger's been in exile. So that's going to be an intriguing matchup. And Thiem has beaten him. He's beaten him on multiple surfaces.
First big win of Thiem's career, Indian Wells final on a hard court against Federer.
Yeah, that was memorable. But back to the Rafa match, remember that the way that Rafa plays one-handed backhands typically is to the backhand, to the backhand, to the backhand. We know that because he wrote that in his book about how he plays Federer, and to have that discipline always to the backhand. It doesn't work against Thiem, at least not right now, because he can the power that he has on that wing and the consistency, he's going to have to figure out some different tactics.
Well, you definitely don't want to hit it to the forehand.
Well, that's the great thing about the game. It's that a guy like Nadal, who built his game a lot of ways beating these one-handers, and Roger had to upgrade his. So Thiem is coming of age, and he's seeing, look what Rafa's doing to these one-handed backhands. Look what Rafa's doing to these one-handed. Mine's got to be really, really good. And that's the great thing about competition, and how one style creates a problem that another has to answer and grapple with. That's right. And Nadal, when he's seeing it's not working, going to the backhand, then he's got to figure out to go to the forehand. I mean, and that's the thing he's been doing for 10 years too, as he did with Novak. Yeah, Thiem is probably the toughest one-hander Rafa's ever faced consistently. I'm not just talking about the resurgent Roger of the big racket and the take it on the rise that we've seen the last 3 or 4 years. Because for most of his career, Nadal has had his way with Federer in the cross-court rallies. It's just the more recent period. So Thiem, though, is like, wow, this guy's doing this from the start, and he hits the down the line backhands, unbelievable, and the cross-court. It's just a remarkable shot.
So, Gil, just to answer your question, first of all, little known tidbit here is that a lot of the scouting on the top men in the world is actually to go to their forehand, believe it or not, because I'm not really sure why, but a lot of players on tour, that stroke will break down quicker in terms of errors than the backhand. The backhand is more consistent. I don't know if that's the case against Thiem, but if you go through it and you're finding that the guy doesn't make errors on either wing, then you're going to have to combo it. You'll have to come up with the twice to the backhand, once to the forehand, and even more minute than that, specific zones within those zones. But everybody has a weak spot where they will break down.
For sure.
The forehand thing, and I know some of that data, and about that with the forehand, that's really interesting, is that this gets back to some basic instructional stuff. When you learn the game and progress from just hacking forehands, you learn that the backhand has a soundness to it, whether it's the one-hander or the two-hander. The two-hander, you got both hands. The one-hander, you're kind of inside the body and out. There's a reliability to the backhand. The backhand is rarely the Maserati. The backhand is rarely determined. I mean, and Thiem will be the first one to tell you that his forehand is the better shot. That's the winning shot. But the forehand can misbehave more. I mean, I think there's kind of a humbleness people bring to their backhands that's mechanically sound. You got to turn. You can get lazy on the forehand, and because you can, even the pros do, and even they sometimes break down. They're too flat. They're short. There's a stability to the mechanics of the backhand, whether it's a one-hander or a two-hander, that allows us to stay steady with the backhand. But the forehand has a dynamic thing. So the forehand is more lively. It's more like you got to be like a little more of a lion tamer with the forehand. But that can go off. So how you break that, I think that's really a fascinating part of the game. And to see how these matchups play out, particularly among the pros, is really fascinating, whether it's combinations or down the line or even coming to the net, all that kind of stuff.
Well, sometimes Thiem will overhit on his forehand. And Joel, I think shot selection plays into the point you were just making, is people will just, if you have as big a forehand as Thiem does, sometimes he doesn't feel like he needs to do as much on the backhand. But I also think 2 points on the Thiem backhand. One, I think Nadal's most successful play against Thiem, when they've played at the French, and then even in their match, it was 7-6, 7-6. Nadal had plenty of success. When he gets Thiem to go to the slice, because he stretched him out wide, and then Nadal can charge the net. He knows that ball is going to float, and then Nadal volleyed brilliantly in that match. So I thought that was the most successful pattern that Nadal
In the first
had.
set, Nadal was 14 of 20 at the net.
Yep.
I think he needs to do that more. It's just kind of the Rafa net rushing. How would I put it? The Rafa net rushing paradox, in that he's good when he gets there, but it's not something he doesn't. I don't think he thinks of it as an A tactic. I think he thinks of it as a B+ tactic, and therefore to do it too much gets him a little out of his tempo range. And so he likes to do it as a variation. It's like a football quarterback. I don't want to have to throw that receiver all the time, and he does it. And because Nadal, and you see even in the near the end of the match, he missed a very easy overhead that brought him down match point in the second set. Though he fought one off with a great forehand drop volley. But I think there's still a part of him, and this gets to the development cycle, that sees that stuff as like extra, not in his operating system, even though he's good at them, but like so the volley for him, he's wondering, God, how many good volleys am I going to be able to hit today? As opposed to some other players who feel they can hit an infinite amount of those.
He should have stuck with it in the second set, I think. Well, I agree. Are you with me on that? Okay.
Another thing. Someone to come to net less.
Yeah. And Joel, I think you would have liked how Thiem a la Federer was taking that backhand on the rise and cutting it off when Nadal was going cross court. And I thought that was really impressive and effective from Thiem.
Well, that's the shot that gets to Amy's point about how the Thiem's one-hander can blunt it. Thiem possesses the shot that Roger has trotted out in the last few years. Roger trotted out the on the rise, take the backhand on the rise, big header racket. This is more in Thiem's operating system. He built this early and young, and he goes after it. So their matchup is fascinating.
It is. I think that's also, though, I think Thiem has really worked on that. I think if you pull up footage of a 22-year-old Dominic Thiem, he's more often than not could be 7-8 feet behind the baseline wailing away. I
agree. This is what's made him his first slam, a hardcourt tournament, and he'd won Indian Wells. I mean, obviously this is a guy who can play on every possible surface. I guess we'll be curious to see how it works towards grass, which is different grass than it used to be, but still how that plays.
He has a great serve. There is no reason why he shouldn't be able to play well on grass.
Well, that kick serve is great.
He needs to return better.
Yeah.
That, to me, that's the grass problem.
That's right.
I think. Yeah. Okay, let's get to someone who returns very, very well. Novak Djokovic. That's a transition.
Yeah.
He lost 6-3, 6-3. Daniil Medvedev. Amy, were you surprised by this result?
Nothing that has happened with him in 2020 is going to surprise me anymore. I mean, just the Gil, you were the one that sent me the text or whatever that said, can you believe this? Novak just said this in a press conference. He's now saying that he favors best of 3, even in slams. Or somehow he's back in the mix on the ATP Player Council. Just when you think, okay, everything's going to go normal with him for the rest of the year, and then he'll start 2021 back where he should be in his rightful place at the top of the game. It's just been a crazy off-balance year for him, and this match against Medvedev was no exception to that.
Yeah, I really thought that Medvedev kind of wanted it more. And that's how the match played out. If Novak was going to win this one, it was going to take a lot of pain, a lot of suffering. First 7 games of the match, they're playing these brutal marathon rallies, and both of their lungs must have felt like tar. And Djokovic was the first player to decide, you know what, I'm done here. I can't continue like this. And it
did seem to me that Novak was gassed, or he didn't have the legs. That did occur to me. It was hard to discern, was it a mental fatigue thing, or physically was he just not all there?
And also it seems that maybe Medvedev wants to make a little statement this time of year. He wins Paris. He's aware that, hey, wait a second, we thought he was the heir apparent, and then Dominic wins the US Open, and what about me? I'm Medvedev. You guys thought I was the greatest thing when I almost beat Rafa at the U.S. Open last year. And now what's going on? I think he wants to make a little statement for himself. And his, he's such a great player, and some really interesting matchups. But yeah, I think he just, okay, all right, Novak, here I am. I'm going to stick in this match. I've beaten you before, and and Medvedev we know is a rough customer.
They're both.
I don't know. You guys are giving Medvedev a lot of credit. My take on it was, and I love Medvedev. Who doesn't? My take on it was his attitude was kind of like, okay, Novak's not bringing his best today. It's there for the taking. Sure. I'm gonna go out and take it. But it wasn't like, ooh, I gotta have this, this will be the conquering of Rome or anything like that.
I'm not thinking about the match. I'm not thinking about the match. I'm thinking about this tournament, this season. It's kind of funny. It's like you look at the tennis year as this series of plot points, and here Medvedev, who did not win the U.S. Open and lost a team in the semis, and Medvedev wants to make a little statement for himself, not just in the match versus Novak, but in the year overall. Don't forget me. I'm a contender. I'm winning Paris. Maybe I can win this London. I'm playing London for the second time, and sometimes the second time a guy plays that year end, he does better.
But these conditions are great for him as well. It's not right. I think that should be taken into account as well. That indoor hard court is really where I would put Medvedev if I want to see him have the most success.
Kind of slow and low.
Exactly. Slow and low is right. And he wants to serve great. And I think the indoor no wind, nice, easy toss that's not going to be flying on you is also a big help.
Does that qualify as a prediction, Gil? Are you making a prediction for this tournament?
No.
Okay.
Not quite. However, he is. I really like him and Thiem, but of course they're the 2-0 players, so it's very easy to say that. It's not. Yeah. I'm not going out on a limb there.
Yeah.
Actually, no. Thiem lost this morning. Excuse me.
Yeah.
2-1. It did seem to me though that both of these players move so well. They are so consistent when they want to be. Their defense is so good that they really struggle to finish the points against each other. So it just turns into these brutal marathons, and it becomes so mental. It becomes, how much are you willing to suffer? Djokovic had a win under his belt. It's the end of the season. Who knows if he's even in his peak physical condition of where he would be in a regular season during the swing of the summer during the majors and French Open, Wimbledon, and U.S. Open. And I just felt like he just gave up on the game plan. He wasn't willing to do what Medvedev would have asked him to do in order to win the match.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty keen analysis. I mean, again, that kind of hunkers down at the baseline. It's almost like a old school clay court match indoors.
Yeah, I mean, it's just for me that kind of a match is frustrating because it's kind of like, well, if somebody would just run a play that finishes at the net, then we wouldn't have to torture ourselves this way. But other people, a lot of fans out there love to see brutal baseline battle, point after point after point.
Well, right.
I agree with you.
Read the development cycle of how these guys built their games, and they kind of hunkered down at the core, and these guys played numerous matches without ever hitting a volley. And yeah, it's kind of interesting how you see all these styles, I guess. Again, Medvedev is such an intriguing mix of tactical skill and some technical genius and some technical gaps, but Novak didn't entirely exploit them because that's not his deal either. So Medvedev probably feels comfortable. It's so interesting how matchups work.
And you remember when Nadal played Medvedev in the 2019 U.S. Open final, the person that was willing to venture into the net, Nadal, was the one who came out on top. So, Novak, I know that this is kind of like, it's not a slam, so he'll take this loss in stride. But if he does have Medvedev in his side of the draw for AO, he needs to go back and watch that match. That's what I would do.
You're so right about this. There was one way where Novak could have effectively finished these points, and it was going to be net rushing. And instead, what he went to is the drop shot. time and time again when he was like, gee, I'm done with this cross-court backhand rally. Just goes to the backhand drop shot down the line. And it was not working because Medvedev was on it and he was so quick around the court. Going to the net is a great play against Daniil because he has these flat strokes. So the ball stays higher up above the net and he doesn't hit that sharp cross-court angle like if you went to the net against Rafa Nadal, the kind of angles that
forehand, particularly Nadal's forehand. Forehand. I just think, though, Novak, again, it's interesting about our three and how they approach these tactics. And I think Novak he came up to net on a few points in that Australian Open finals, we recall, against Thiem, and that helps him. But it's still, I said earlier how it's an incidental tactic for Nadal. I think it's even more of an incidental tactic for Novak. I think Novak, when it comes to it, he makes Nadal look like Patrick Rafter. I mean, and I just think Novak doesn't like having to hit repeated volleys over the course of a match. I mean, it doesn't seem that comfortable technically. I mean, he can. It's like when I watch him line up for a volley or an overhead, I think, okay, steady, easy, got it, good. You're a pro. You can do these things. But there's something that doesn't fill me with like thinking, yeah, he's loving doing this and he's great, but it's not quite his. I mean, there's something he's structured that way. And yeah, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And the overhead broke Djokovic's will ultimately at this 3-all game in the first set was a marathon game and Novak's down break point and he has an overhead and he just doesn't finish it. It's up the middle, medium pace, didn't finish the overhead. Medvedev comes back and wins the point and the match was never the same after that 1 point.
Well, remember the French Open final where Nadal early on hit some lobs. I mean, look, it's strange to say that someone like Djokovic, who has a strong chance of winning more majors than anyone ever, that his overhead is a little bit like Shaquille O'Neal at the free throw line, or right? Like it's like, wow, that's kind of intriguing. I don't fully understand that among pro players. That shot.
It's strange.
That's the tennis.
Yeah. When it comes to Novak's volleying, I just think it's one of the reasons that Medvedev is such a tough matchup for him. And I just think it's really one of those scenarios where, styles make fights is the saying in combat sports, and the same is true in tennis. And, if you look at Nadal's head-to-head against Medvedev and Djokovic's head-to-head against Medvedev, I just think it's a tougher matchup for Djokovic because the ways that you need to finish points against Daniil are ways that Novak does not prefer to finish points. He wants to rally with you backhand to backhand and find that short ball, that opening, and then, either hit a big forehand and finish in 2 shots or maybe redirect the backhand down the line. And against Medvedev, it's like the meme of Spider-Man pointing at each other because they're going back and forth. And it's like, hey, why am I not making any progress hitting cross-court backhands? This is weird.
Yeah, and so rather than him come into the net himself or design a play that will elicit a short ball, an approach that will bring him into the net, Novak prefers to bring the other guy into the net with a drop shot. And for Daniil, that's 2 steps and he's there. So it's just, and he moves well. A 6'6" guy who moves well and has long legs, that's just not effective.
And he kind of likes some of those kind of points, Medvedev, because he kind of likes, there's a bit of a public parks improv quality to the way he builds points. That's kind of
Parks and Rec.
Yeah, it's like you want to drop shot me? Okay, I'll do that. And I mean, I've seen Medvedev at the net hit some remarkably non-aesthetic yet effective volleys. It's like, what was that? And yet he's kind of there. He likes the improv, and I think when it comes to someone as great a ground stroker as Novak coming to net, he's not always as comfortable doing that whole improv transition thing. I mean, he's skilled, he's competent. I mean, his ground strokes, I mean, those are great approach shots, the kind of shots he comes in. They're so deep and low, and then he has the drop shot. So we can just see how he innovates and rounds out his game in the years to come too, because people are aware of Novak. There's going to be maybe there'll be more Medvedevs, just like Nadal. Thiem has posed more of these questions to Nadal. People are going to be posing more questions to Novak, and I can't wait to see how he adjusts that, because he's proven adaptable in his career.
Yes, and I think of the three, I believe that Novak is one of the more adaptable. So if he needs to work on that aspect of his game, he will.
I agree. The implication, I think, though, against Medvedev right now, as it stands, is when they meet, it's just, okay, who's ready to physically die?
Yeah.
Right.
Not good.
So
not good for who? Not good for who? For
it depends.
Novak or Daniil?
It's not good for Novak, and it's not good for the viewer, in my opinion, or at
I
least
don't agree.
me, the
I
viewer.
enjoy it.
Okay.
Oh, all right,
Okay.
well,
I get that.
let's
I get that.
stylistic thing. So Gil, yeah, you play more like a contemporary player than any of us. So when you've encountered someone who plays like you, but arguably better, what do you do to break up their line?
When I can't finish someone and
You
I'm getting really exhausted.
It's like, wow,
I bet I know the answer. Go ahead and say the answer, and then I'll tell you what I think you were going to say.
You write it down and you can reveal it. Like
no, in that case, I decide that when I get a short ball on my forehand, then I'm going to follow it up to the net. That's the decision. If I'm like, I can't finish this guy, I will just say, okay, next time I get a short ball, instead of ripping and staying back, I'll hit an approach shot.
That's not what I thought he was going to say. I thought he was going to say, you adopt an attitude of, this guy will not outlast me. Just, I will not die. He thinks that he's going to go down. This is going to be a battle of wills from the baseline.
That used to be it. And now I'm out of shape, Amy.
Oh, okay.
So this gets to also how a player develops. And I think it's important for someone like Novak, let's say he wants to come to net more against someone like Medvedev because he knows that's going to help him. He needs to do that in earlier rounds of tournaments. Invest in that tactic so he can feel comfortable doing it in these other matches. And I think, again, without sounding too preachy to our audience, I think that's an important thing to do as building a game, as building a playing style. Is like, okay, instead of winning a match 1-1 the way you know you can win the match, try to win the match another way. Go in the club tournament serving and volleying, whatever it is, to do something different, because then you can then you'll feel comfortable trotting it out in that big match. And so it's interesting to see how Novak again continues to dimensionalize his game. And,
there's a coach, you may know him, Jorge Capistani, a really well-known coach in college tennis circles, and very good. Like, he's a master pro and worldwide, whatever. He has a saying that if you don't use that tactic or play that shot when it's match point and you're in a tournament, like if it's serve and volley or if it's backhand down the line, whatever it is, you don't have that shot. So you may hit it 1,000,000 times, but if you're not using it on match point when everything's on the line, then you don't have command of that shot. You don't have it in your arsenal.
I like that. I do think it might be worth pointing out that maybe Novak is like, look, if this were a Grand Slam final, I would have dug in and been willing to do that, to do the suffering necessary. But since this is a tournament that I can actually lose a match and still lift the trophy at the end.
Yeah, Gil,
Gil,
I think that's spot on. I felt that. Yeah, you nailed it. Yeah.
Me too. All right. Well, this was fun. Nadal, Djokovic both take losses, but again, as I just said, they're not out of it. So we will see what happens as we continue to enjoy this ATP final. That'll do it for this episode of 3. We're available on all podcast platforms and greatly appreciate it if you leave a rating and review on Apple, subscribe on YouTube, and leave a comment. We will see you next time on the next episode of 3.